Liberty City isn't really a town which we remember as one that would emit positive energy. In fact, it's safe to say that the developers did their utmost to raise the chances of us getting depressed by around 95%. Sadness is everywhere. We're playing with a character which carries a whole set of atrocious experiences. Nico's statements and behavior clearly show us that he suffers from PTSD, post-war trauma, and heavy depression.
After you walk into a village, and you see 50 children, all sitting neatly in a row against the church wall, you realize that the creature that could do this doesn't have a soul.
To add to that, the developers constantly remind us how bad the place we found ourselves in is. At every corner await terrifying events. Constant mentions of sexual abuse, drugs, and humans' vileness, as well as of atrocious events such as the story of the serial killer Eddie Lowe. In between all this, we've got many depressing episodes to do with Nico's close ones getting harmed or kidnapped. We've also got the horrifying background of the game, which is presented through the in-game websites, for example. They clearly indicate that the city is home to a net of PDF files. If we dig closer, we can arrive at details to do with terrorism or scandalous behaviors of the American government, who cover up some dirt every now and then. The sad main story is just a drop in the ocean. It's safe to say that the real evil lies beyond the main story, or alternatively, at its borders. Since we have quite a heavy scandal going on in real life to do with this in the recent months, I think it's best to start with sexual offenses and the adult's sympathy towards children. Yes, the undesired kind. According to a survey, the website myroomonline.net is host to 8 million active accounts of sex offenders. In the in-game internet, we can actually encounter an individual belonging to that group. That man is the owner of the profile called Extra Juicy Chick 69. Sounds tempting indeed. Even I dropped making the video the first time I saw her and began to look for that lady's digits. And thank God I didn't manage to. The whole profile is written in such a way as to present herself as a very young, attractive chick who likes you-know-what. The profile looks as one big hot mamas in your neighborhood advert. Only pros, no cons.
These are the American titties my cousin told me about.
It's getting worse as one reads through. It quickly turns out that the owner is interested exclusively in boys below 16, which they don't even try to hide. There's also no shortage of messages to the people interested to keep their potential relationship in secret from their parents. No wonder that the police in Liberty City set up a trap for such perverts. You know the website LittleLaceySurprisePageant.com? The website suggests it's a website of a kid's beauty contest, but was eventually taken over by the police. It works as bait. If someone tries to access it, the system immediately marks that person as a suspect, and the police are sent to their location. You know, that's the way authorities from Liberty City invented to locate the PDFs. Going back to the profile, despite it having many red flags warning the viewers away from interacting with Extra Juicy Chick 69, there still were some candidates in the comments. One of them even attended a date with that would-be Queen of Delight. Only that, as expected, the Queen of Delight turned out to be a 50-year-old dude. At the meeting, he had his victim bathe him and change his diaper. The worst thing is that the website myroomonline.net is very popular. It shows that people in Liberty City are only looking for quick adventures. They abandoned the concept of real love and mutual care. The main dream of a Liberty City citizen is texting some chick online and meeting up for a quick business. Besides, you don't need to look far in the Soul story to find people who impersonate that approach. Roman, Luis, Carmen, and so on. Another problem is that you ain't gotta go down to the underground or browse some suspicious matrimonial websites to find people who have a complete mess in their head. Sometimes it only takes going to a lawyer. Remember Tom Goldberg, the one Nico kills at the orders of Francis? I don't know if you're familiar, but Tom Goldberg apparently had some dirt on Francis. Thus, Francis was looking for a hired gun who'd get that lawyer out of the way before he could stir up trouble for Francis. Francis was saying that Mr. Goldberg apparently likes to take photos of men in the showers so he can later have a good time with those photos. Yeah, pretty sick stuff. One might even think that it's bullcrap, cause how come? A lawyer's supposed to do stuff like that? Francis surely talks like that just so Nico doesn't hesitate to kill Goldberg in the decisive moment. Well, not quite. See, as it can be read on the company's website or heard from Goldberg's assistant at his company's office, Goldberg is involved in giving disabled kids swimming lessons. Sounds pretty benevolent. However, on the website, there's a very telling mention about Goldberg having a very hands-on approach when it comes to the swimming lessons. I hope everyone can connect the dots on their own here because I'd really like to avoid having to describe the details. And then we've got those accusations of Francis, and it's becoming clear with whom we're dealing with in the case of Goldberg. The company of Goldberg seems to be full of crap as well. The company's motto is, "Corruption is everywhere, you just gotta look for it." In other words, all it takes is to go to Mr. Goldberg, give him a wad of cash, and he'll happily try to ruin whoever you point at.
Who doesn't wait? Whoa! Is that thing real? You know, if that thing goes off, we can sue the shit out of whoever sold it to you. Maybe we can look into that after the interview. Let the security guard Mudupe play with it for a while. See what happens.
A good example is the story of how Goldberg's company bankrupted the owner of a pharmaceutical company, Beta Pharmaceuticals. The story of that man is actually impressive. Started out as a small entrepreneur, won a fight with cancer, and thanks to his resilience and hard work, he eventually became the CEO of one of the biggest pharmaceutical firms. The man was awarded several humanitarian prizes and gave away a portion of his income to charities. Meanwhile, Goldberg's firm saw this as just a challenge. A guy who, in theory, is stainless? That will do as a great trophy if Goldberg managed to find something on him. And he did. They found some minor accounting inconsistencies. The result was not that minor though, as Goldberg's victim had to pay a 7-digit penalty sum and resign from his position in the company. Then, his wife divorced him, and one of his daughters turned to prostitution. Was Goldberg proud to have ruined an innocent person's life? He sure as hell was. Precisely that kind of companies achieve success in Liberty City. The Soul case with Francis works as good confirmation too. Goldberg admits himself that he considers Francis a good cop, but he still wants to bring him down. You know, out of principle, just to show everybody that he can do anything.
There's this cop, good cop, but he thinks he's above the law. He's not. You wanna know why? Because the law is clear. I'm gonna crush him into dust.
And of course, Francis wasn't an angel and had his dirty methods. But he did take his job as a policeman very seriously. Regardless of Francis' personality, I'm sure the LCPD would become a more efficient authority under his command. Francis may even been a bit of an asshole, but he had his philosophy, and he was prepared to fight for it. Mr. Michael Graves is not much better than Goldberg. He was a candidate for governor who was also charged with sexual harassment of kids. It's also worth adding that he once spent $40,000 from the city's budget for a private vacation in the Philippines. Well, we've got used to that even in real life when it comes to politicians. As we're on this topic, it'd be difficult not to mention the sick story of Eddie Lowe, but we already talked about him in one of the videos on the channel, and secondly, the things he did with kids is the kind of things I cannot even tell you about because the video would immediately be flagged as 18+, and you'd not even see it anyway. That's why we keep going. This time, we'll talk about Ernesto Asaltacunas. The Cuban baseball player was accused of dating teenage girls. Once, he was even arrested for possession of child pornography. He suffered zero consequences for that, of course. The charges were dropped, and Mr. Asaltacunas was still walking free. His career is also one big joke because the guy was doping heavy, just as half of his teammates. Doping and all those scandals did not stand in the way of partnership with the Eris footwear company. They designed a sneakers model, which they promoted through a partnership with Asaltacunas. On the other hand, this hardly comes as a surprise as that company is one big controversy. Its owner, who is a steroid junkie himself,
he made sneakers people would kill for and presented himself as a health nut extraordinaire, but Eris CEO Pete Vassell has checked himself into a rehab after admitting a serious addiction to steroids amid numerous reports of roid rage. Mr. Vassell, who claimed to be all about health, is being sued by 4 employees who say he demanded they squeeze the zits on his back.
Admitted to forcing women and children to labor, or that his products are sold at a 10,000% markup. He explained that it's a very smart and necessary business strategy, as kids need less sleep hours than adults and women are better at multitasking. Of course, those statements didn't hurt the firm's reputation in any significant way. Liberty City also raised one crazy scientist who cloned himself several times in different ages, including an underage version of himself. He did this in order to, let's say, spend time with them clones. A complete nightmare. I'm not even going to comment on this. I just want to forget I ever read this. The biggest scandals are to be found if we start to dig around in terrorism-related stories and the government's actions in Liberty City. Terrorism gave birth to another absurdity, the so-called Jingoism Act. It was a resolution which allowed the authorities to legally stalk and collect even discreet information about any citizen, privacy has been essentially buried deep underground. Was the threat even realistic? Yeah, it somewhat was. After all, as Salvatore Leone once said,
"Just because I think everyone hates me doesn't mean they don't. Know what I mean?"
However, this whole jingoism act was not made in order to reduce the terror threat. It was made in order to first have better control over society, and second, in order to wreak panic so as to keep receiving anti-terrorism fundings.
Nothing increases funding for fighting terror more than successful acts of terrorism.
The city authorities, as we could regularly observe during gameplay, utilized every petty event to make people afraid. You know, people will happily give away their hard-earned dollars in order to raise their chances of survival. The worst thing is that the threat was nonetheless there. However, the government took the money and surveilled the people, while in reality, they didn't have tools to actually combat the threat. That led to completely absurd situations, like Nico being asked by a government agency to take out dangerous folks. Exactly. Bernard of the United Liberty paper had to blackmail criminals like Nico, so they eliminate uncomfortable targets who genuinely posed a threat to the city's safety. So paradoxically, one could say that criminals contributed more to the safety of the city than the police. After all, when threat had to be eliminated, it was people like Nico or Jacob who had to hunt down Adam Demayev or Edvard Borodin, so the people who financed terrorists. The worst is that the government did not only target terrorists. That's neatly shown by the case of Alexander Minkov. Minkov was another victim of the IAA agency, whose murder was conducted via the hands of Niko Bellic. Minkov was not a criminal though, and definitely not a significant one. In fact, from his mailbox and his in-game dialogue, it could be concluded that he was a good guy with a handful of loyal friends. What could Minkov possibly have done for the agency to want to get rid of him? Well, he had one weakness. He liked conspiracy. By searching his computer, one can conclude that Minkov liked to engage in internet conspiracy fora. Additionally, he took the matter seriously enough to use his contacts to conduct investigations of matters he came across. Granted, those were rather amateur attempts, but they were sufficient to get his name on the authorities' hit list. The game never revealed to us the details as to what Minkov had exactly done to earn his death warrant. However, it can be assumed that one of his theories he shared on the internet turned out to be dangerously close to reality. Perhaps Minkov came across a genuine government scam, and therefore the IAA signed his death warrant for Minkov not to be able to spread his discoveries further. Nico or Jacob weren't the only examples of criminals who did work for the government. Partnering with gangsters was one of IAA's favorite strategies. Another good proof is Bernard's relationship with John Gravelli, the don of the strongest mafia family in Liberty City.
Normally I don't care about cocaine, keeps controllable people in power, but this is no good.
We can conclude from the story that the IAA most likely supplied Gravelli with drugs. That was supposed to maintain his high status in the underworld. In exchange, Gravelli was meant to provide the IAA with information and possibly human resources whenever the IAA needed some dirty work done under the table. You know, the same case as with Nico and Minkov. Besides, this is materialized in the story itself. Nico received tasks from Gravelli, who in turn was taking orders from Bernard of the ULP. So yeah, the IAA agency bought themselves contacts who gave them a line of sight into the criminal underworld and influence therein. Playing Niko Bellic, we could observe this criminal government partnership from a very close range. A quite interesting contrast to what we're talking about are the famous people who can't see past their own interests. We can encounter some of them in Liberty City if we want to. The story of Tyler Dixon is one not to be forgotten in terms of today's topic. Tyler smoked PCP since the age of 5. He lost his virginity to his mother at the age of 9. During the events of GTA 4, Tyler engages in a relationship with Chloe Parker, who's a celebrity. Chloe is a typical daddy's girl. She's famous because she's rich. She's rich only because her father is a multi-billionaire. Chloe, on their first week anniversary, I didn't even know people celebrated that, bought Dixon, a whale. Apparently, he didn't like the gift that much, as soon enough the pair of lovers split. Dixon didn't want to waste the opportunity though, and wanted Chloe to pay him $3 million as some kind of breakup compensation or something. Meanwhile, his further plans included starting a TV show about his life and promoting it thanks to the fame he gained by dating Parker. So essentially, what a wonderful city. Some rich idiot buys a whale with her daddy's money for her partner, on whom she'll cheat soon enough anyway. All the while, half the city's population lives in poverty. Another person worth talking about in the context of today's video is Bryce Dawkins, the deputy mayor in Liberty City. We even have dealings with him via Nico's old buddy, Florian Kravich. Florian is homosexual. His current lover was none other than Bryce Dawkins. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But it gets worse if we look at what Dawkins is talking in the media. See, Dawkins is the hypocrite of the century. His political views put family values on a pedestal, and he condemns homosexual behaviors. Meanwhile, Dawkins himself is in a relationship with another man. To add to that, he pays for Florian's apartment with the state's money and does all that in secret from his wife. Bryce Dawkins doesn't know where his brakes are. He preaches his pathetic views in the media. His would-be hatred towards the homosexuals reaches as far as blaming them for things like inflation or terrorism, or wanting to forbid them from becoming firefighters. Some sources also state that Dawkins got his political position only because he bought his way into the mayor's office thanks to his contacts in the market. Those contacts apparently agreed to finance government spying operations. Once Dawkins and Florian's relationship came out to light at the end of the story, Bryce obviously denied everything. He also said he was addicted to sex. He also added, I guess as to confirm the importance he puts on family values, that he regularly enjoyed lap dances at strip clubs. Complete bestiality in this city is to be seen literally everywhere. For instance, one time a pilot who piloted a plane from Vice City to Liberty was drunk as a sailor on the flight. He was pulling complete madness. He shouted weird things, acted like he was at a party, made fun of passengers, or even took off his clothes and persuaded the air hostesses to have their way with him. On board were 212 passengers and a pilot crew, but the pilot couldn't give two hoots about endangering the lives of around 220 people and nearly leading to a plane disaster. And later, he just said, "Sorry, I got a little carried away." His punishment showed something different though. The pilot was suspended for 2 weeks. AKA was given 2 weeks off, which he spent very successfully, as he later shared with his friends. Total degeneracy is going on in the context of the pharmaceutical industry too. Huge markups put by companies like Beta Pharmaceuticals led to an influx of cloned meds. You know, not everyone could afford the original ones, so substitutes appeared on the market. Those were of questionable quality. In the case of such medications, the patients often weren't aware that they were gambling with their lives. In the game, we can admire a story of a man who thought he was taking something to help him with his panic attacks. Well, he ended up with a 72-hour erection and lost his job at school. In downtown Algonquin, next to the Middle Park, we can find a spectacular structure in the shape of the Libertonian Museum. Unfortunately, all the charm's gone once we find out whose hands built it. The helping hand was reached out by the heroic family of Cleethorpes, who very generously offered the mayor help in terms of renovating the facility. The labor force of the company turned out to be Hispanic slave workers, whom Cleethorpes forced to labor for bread, water, and any place to sleep. The best thing is that the radio news report actually played a statement of one of them workers who couldn't speak English. He said in Spanish that he's forced to work for almost nothing and that he needs help.
Esta gente me están forzando a trabajar por pan malo, agua y un sitio para dormir. Ayúdame, por favor, ayúdame.
Of course, no one bothered to translate that for the listeners, while the Cleethorpes family was presented as generous and benevolent. What was presented today was to show how corrupted the place we deal with while getting to know the story of Niko Bellic is. But that's far from everything. If you'd like to find out about other stories hiding behind the beautiful mask of Liberty City, let me know. Meanwhile, thank you to the supporters. Take care and see you soon.